Hello there guys, this is Teacher Krishna and welcome to our next class for the third unit. This is a class that is part of the high school and of course is intended to ninth BYS. And just like you know, our subject is biology and today we're going to be working on week number 23. Thank you a lot for coming and let's go over our presentation. First of all, remember to have your notebook with you in order to make today's summary. That is very important, as well as the parts that you need to include. You need to include date, end in mind, the title, summary, and of course some extra decoration in your notebook. Today we're going to be studying lesson number 2, Human Genetic Disorders. You are going to find this topic in pages 140 to 145. The end in mind for today is the following. Identify 2 major causes of genetic disorders and how they are traced, diagnosed, and treated. Let me give you a small summary of the activities that you need to do today. First of all, watch this video and make a summary in your notebook. Number 2, read pages 140 to 145 and complement your summary. I suggest that you read everything, but of course that you focus a little bit more on pages 144 and 145. And of course, you need to complete the books exercises from pages 140 to 145. But the ones that we are going to complete during the mid-session are going to be from pages 144 and 145. And lastly, you need to share. You need to share pictures of your summary and exercises with your teacher through Google Drive. I'm going to be giving you additional instructions during the mid-session, in which I'm going to be sending you the link where you have to submit the pictures of your summary, all right? And of course, the exercises. So let's jump to our topic for today. First of all, we're going to start by analyzing a doggy diagnosis. So why are we talking about dogs right now? Well, let's take a look at it. So humans and dogs share similar disease. And we can mention cancer, diabetes, allergies, epilepsy, and eye disease. It is extremely interesting because these are probably the pets we have the most contact with. Or like in average, like in all around the world, the dogs are the most common pets around. And it's interestingly, they share many diseases with humans. I don't know if it's probably because that amount of contact that we have had with them, like we have developed some sort of similarities in our DNA, or it's just because of other causes. I don't really know. It's mere speculation. These disorders are easier to be found in dogs, since most of these mutations affect only one of their genes. So when we compare a blueprint of DNA in dogs and in humans, we are going to find out that in dogs, only one of their genes are affected when one of these problems is actually appearing in the organism. But it is different when we analyze it in humans because what happens is that more than one of our genes is usually affected when we present one of these disorders or mutations. That is why scientists are especially interested in dogs, because they hope that after tracing and after studying a little bit more the mutations and of course the disorders in dogs, they are going to be able to do something else about the disorders in humans. And lastly, what is the picture that we have right over here? The picture that you can see right there is of a very precious dog that unfortunately is blind. And what's this kind of artifact that it has around its head? Well, basically, it's like something that is going to help the dog to mobilize around. So in case it is about to actually hit an object that is right in front of him, then this object is going to prevent it from happening, which is something pretty interesting, and that it's something that I didn't know about until I actually investigated a little bit more about this topic. Something interesting, right? So how are genetic disorders inherited in humans? And here we have a very interesting picture of some blood cells. We have red blood cells and sickle cells. So how do humans inherit something like this? So first of all, we need to start by defining genetic disorder. It is an abnormal condition that people inherit. Some of these are caused by mutations in the DNA, while others are caused by changes in the general structure of chromosomes. So, for example, right over here, we have the normal blood cells, which will be like the typical red blood cells, but there are some others that are sickle cells. So these sickle cells are basically a mutation, or just like we're mentioning right here, a genetic disorder, because it's something abnormal that we can find in human blood. And a type of genetic disorder can be cystic fibrosis, and it is caused when the offspring inherits two alleles from this mutation. It removes three paired bases from the DNA. Abnormal thick mucus is produced in lungs and intestines, which can cause problems, such as making it hard to breathe. So, of course, we need to remember that we were working with Punnett squares and, of course, with just generalities of genetics, right? So, of course, we have some information from genetical information that comes from the mother and some genetical information that comes from the father. So in this case, if the individual actually inherits two alleles that are going to produce cystic fibrosis, and this mutation is going to cause that some mucus is formed in his lungs and, of course, in his intestines. So what's going to happen is that he is going to have problems that a normal person will not have without this mutation. And now we're going to talk about sickle cell disease, which is basically what is represented in this picture. So people with this disorder produce normal hemoglobin and abnormal hemoglobin. Abnormal hemoglobin is made of larger blood cells with a different shape. That can cause obstruction in the vessels. So basically what happens with these irregular sickle cells or blood cells is that they are going to be obstructing the vessels of a person. And it can actually lead to several problems, such as actually the amputation of a limb. So if too many of the sickle vessels are going to, or the sickle cells are going to obstruct a vessel, for example, in the arm of a person, what is going to happen is that it's going to cause that actually blood cannot flow properly through that limb. So when the organism perceives something like that, what happens is that the heart is going to start actually trying to pump the blood harder and harder. And if the limb is not removed, then the heart is going to continue trying to pull the blood so hard that it can cause a stroke. And that is terrible, and that's why doctors, when the problem is too severe, they prefer to amputate the limb of the person. All right. And how are genetic disorders inherited in humans? Oh, and this is something very interesting that we're going to study just in a while. We have hemophilia. And it is a disorder that causes a person's blood to clot very slowly or not at all. The people with this disorder are highly vulnerable to small bruises and internal bleeding. It is a sex-linked disorder, which is more typical in male. So basically what we can see right here in the picture is hemophilia. And what's going to happen? Let's suppose that this person has hemophilia. And by an accident, this person just hit his knee on the wall. Well, on a normal person, what is going to happen is that the blood of the person is simply going to clot. So the bleeding is going to stop and nothing else is going to happen. But with people with hemophilia, what happens is that the blood just can't clot, or it does it super slowly. So the bleeding inside of the person's knee is going to continue, causing it to lose high amounts of blood. So these people must be super careful with this kind of injuries that might be very simple and, of course, not harmful for a regular person, but that it can be even deadly for them. We also have another example, which is the Down syndrome, and the person has an extra copy of chromosome 21. So remember that our chromosomes are always in pairs, but people with the Down syndrome don't have like a pair of chromosome 21, but they are going to have like three copies of chromosome 21. It will be like a triplet. And it happens when chromosomes fail to separate properly during the meiosis process. When the gametes form, I'm sorry that there is a mistake in there, it should be gametes form. And people have a certain level of intellectual disability as well as hearing disabilities. Of course, this extra copy can generate problems such as the ones that are stated here, like intellectual disability or hearing disability. And how are genetic disorders traced, diagnosed, and treated? This is something very interesting that is very actual, actually. So, scientists use pedigrees, karyotypes, and genetic testing to trace, diagnose, and treat genetic disorders. We're going to analyze what each one of these terms mean in a while. People with genetic disorders can be helped through medical care, education, and job training. Like if we talk about a person with a Down syndrome, of course, through education, we can support that person and, of course, help her to become better in life. Now we're going to talk about pedigree. What is it? It is similar to a family tree, where the family members with a particular disorder are identified in order to study a genetic pattern. I want to show you an example of what pedigree looks like. So basically right over here is like the family tree, but we're going to be identifying different colors and shapes in order to trace the specific disorder that we want to study. That's basically what pedigree is about. And of course, with this, we can analyze if it affects a male mostly, or if it affects a female most of the time, or if it affects both genders equally. It can be any of those results. All right, guys, so basically that's it for today's session. Remember to read the last pages in your book. So, of course, you can continue learning a little bit more about what I was telling you about here, about how to actually trace, diagnose, and treat the genetic disorders. Of course, we already studied the pedigrees, but you're going to find more information about karyotypes and genetic testing in the last pages of the book. So make sure to go back to the activity section to notice what you have to do today. That'll be pretty much about it. Thank you a lot for coming, and I will meet you next coming week. So goodbye, guys. Take care.